Thank you, Geetika, and welcome, Joseph, sir, to this event.
Thank you so much,
And
Martin. Thank you
Joseph,
for
sir, this
having
is
me.
my pleasure, sir. And Joseph, sir, this is a special day for you because it's your birthday. And we are going to roll on with this. A very special birthday wishes to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Martin, once again. And thanks to EVENTFAQ and all the others who are organizing this for having me on my birthday.
Sir, my first question to you is Kerala has been through some radical ups and downs during the COVID-19 pandemic. How has your experience been? And do you feel things are under control now?
I think it's too early to say that things are under control. At the start of the pandemic, the government perhaps made the mistake of thinking that with the initial low spread of COVID in the state, it continued to be sustainable. But unfortunately, it turned out to be a little bit otherwise. But then there's good news. The good news is that the vaccines against the virus are now available or are likely to be available very soon. And vaccination on a massive scale is likely to begin very soon. Now, my first point in this is that since the economy of a state like Kerala, I won't say is dependent, but a large part of it is dependent on tourism and travel. One of the first things I will say to the government of Kerala, and I would like the tourism industry to push it before the government and the government of Kerala and the government of India, is that the tourism sector should be given priority in the administration of the vaccine. Because if you can make the tourism industry immune to the COVID, then tourists will feel confident about coming in. So one of the things that you should push first, Martin, and FAQ and EMC, etc., is to push this before the government, before the government of India, before the government of Kerala, to ensure that the travel and tourism industry in Kerala gets a priority in the administration of the vaccine. A policy needs to be put in place to give such priority. And I think that is one of the first steps that should be done to ensure that the benefit of the vaccine is passed on to the travel industry and thereby passed on to the general public across the state, because everybody benefits in the state if tourists begin to pour in once again. So our focus of attention of the tourism industry should be on ensuring that everyone gets vaccinated, everyone associated with the industry, directly in industry, gets vaccinated on a priority basis.
Very true, sir. Already there are, the sunrise is started in terms of the tourism industry. There are a lot of hopes which is flowing down. We also made a representation to the government of Kerala in that matter. So we think very soon the tourism sector will be open and the events will be back. So when we talk about Kerala, God's own country instantly comes to the mind. Among the worst hit sectors by the lockdown globally, what are the challenges you see in Kerala bouncing back onto the tourism front?
Martin, I think, as you said, the travel and tourism industry is one of the worst affected industries globally in India, and therefore certainly in Kerala. The challenges that we face, and I think these challenges may not be particular to Kerala, it would be global, but because we are speaking in terms of Kerala, I think I'm underlining it, is the fear complex, the fear of travel. People are still scared to travel. You won't believe it, I visited 80 countries, but I've not caught a plane after March. This latent fear, and even if I overcome the fear, others might fear. So the biggest challenge is to get over the fear. The fear is particularly pronounced, I'm sure, amongst domestic tourists, people from the country. For I dare to suggest that the young, backpacking and tourists from abroad, from overseas, are more likely to take up the challenges of travel during COVID and post-COVID than our own domestic tourists. There is a need, therefore, to get over this fear. There's a need for government to be able to get over this fear, and the government of Kerala needs to open up the tourist sector very, very fast. Now, that cannot be done without putting in place a host of measures that the tourists coming to the state does not bring with them COVID when they come, very important, but equally important that after a holiday here, they do not take back with them COVID when they go. So the government has to put in place a host of measures, protocols, systems and procedures that incoming tourists, travel and tourism industry, everybody associated with it, have to strictly adhere to. Now, I think what bodies like EVENTFAQ and EEMA can do and should do is to define and determine what these measures, protocol systems and procedures ought to be, and place it before the government, prepare those protocols, prepare drafts of those systems, measures, place them before government for government approval so that the government issues legally binding orders. This is to be done. Once this is done and once government has put in place these legally binding protocols, etc., it should be ensured that they're implemented. I'm sure the tourism industry can do it. And they must be given the widest possible publicity nationally across India and other states and also overseas and in other parts of the country, that these systems are in place in the state, that are mandatory. And that will build, I think, to a certain extent, the necessary confidence that Kerala, God's own country, is also a COVID-safe destination. And that's very important. So that is what we should be doing. And it's very important for organizations like EVENTFAQ, EEMA to develop these, because if you purely depend on the government to do it, perhaps they may take more time. You have to develop it, place it before the government, and get them approved so that Kerala is a safe destination, a COVID-safe destination. That's very important. And that's how it should be, publicized across nationally and abroad.
Thank you, sir. We already have our protocols ready, and then we are also engaged with the local authorities here. We are also going to the government for the submission of protocols also. So, would it be fair to say that Kerala has relied more on tourist inflow thanks to all the natural beauty and hospitality rather than event-led tourism? Do you see potential there?
I think it's quite true. I think Kerala has relied a lot for its inflow of tourists on its natural beauty and hospitality rather than event-led tourism. It's very true. I don't think Kerala has a culture of event-led tourism, like, for example, the Mamalapuram, the Mahabalipuram dance festival in Tamil Nadu, the Gujarat Kite Festival, even why the Republic Day Parade in January in Delhi is an event-led tourism occasion. The Surajkud Arts Mela, for example, the Vasant Panchami Desert Festival of Rajasthan, Taj Festival. Even Goa has a carnival during April, during the season of Lent and just before Easter and Good Year. And Kerala does not have any of this. Though over the last few years, I must say the Kochi Biennale has attracted a great deal of national and overseas tourist attention. But there's so much more that can be done around the Cochin Biennale, and we should not leave it merely to Cochin Biennale to develop that tourist package around an event, even a 30, 40-day event that goes on continuously in Cochin, like the Cochin Arts Biennale. I think the tourism industry should step forward to complement what the Kochi Biennale Foundation is doing. You should get in touch with Bose Krishnamachari, who is running the show now, and I'm sure he'll come up with wonderful ideas. He's an artist, and he's got tremendous ideas to bring attention to the Cochin Biennale, to use it as a tourist event in Kerala. Along with that, there are so many festivals in Kerala that can be promoted as tourist events internationally. We are not doing it. The Thrissur Puram comes to my mind immediately. The Thrissur Puram is a magnificent event, colorful, sound and light and show, and it's the best. It's something that can draw in tens of thousands of foreign tourists, overseas tourists, if not lakhs. Now, provided we are able, the tourism industry is able to provide proper facilities and viewpoints, etc., for them. As you know, people crowd during the Puram festival to see the exchange of those colorful umbrellas, to see those elephants, caparisoned elephants, standing in such glory with the setting western sun on their ornamentation on their trunks. Now, it's a huge crowd, and there's a lot of crush in the crowds. And tourists may not quite like to be crushed in the crush that are associated with Puram, yet they would like to view it and even be a part of it without being a part of it, if you know what I mean. So I think that's a sort of space that we should create for overseas tourists who will have who will be part of the crowd, but not yet a part of the crowd, safe enclosures for them, different enclosures on a very large scale. I'm not speaking of tiny pockets. I'm speaking, and then promote a tourism nationally and internationally around the Thrissur Puram. If you ask about the Thrissur Puram, I don't think even 10% or 5% of my viewers, people who are listening to me now, would know what it is. But it's a magnificent event. It's this contest for attention between for the attention of Lord Shiva in the Vadakunath temple in Trichur, and it's a tremendously it's an event that is suited for an event-led tourism, and yet we are not using it. And there are lots of church festivals also, Perunals as we call it, the big day or whatever, as we call it in central Kerala, with their quaint customs, with their which almost brings to you of days gone by, extremely well suited for such a tourism event. I was born in a place called Ullur. It's a suburb of Trichur, where we have the festival of the Archangel Gabriel on, I think, 23rd and 24th, October 23rd and 24th every year. It's a magnificent event, not quite on the scale of Puram, of course not, much smaller, but it's something to see, something to enjoy. I think you can link up all these events together in an event-led tourist calendar for Kerala, and you can bring in a lot of foreign and national tourists around it. And I think it also helps in furthering our culture. So I think there is tremendous scope here, especially around the Trishur Puram, around the Cochin Binali, and around so many other small church and temple and mosque festivals in the state. There's a need for pushing it, I think. That is what the future holds for the travel industry in Kerala. Elephants are a big attraction here. People love to see elephants. I love to see them, even though I was born here. So tourism can be centered around that. And things like, husking of coconuts for making ropes, which go into the making of carpets. That's a sight to see, and many people would love to see how it is done. It's done in a very manual way, and you can use that to promote tourism. The cashew industry, the way the cashew is processed, is also something that can be a tourist event. So there are so many ideas that's possible. I think these are things that we should take up post-COVID, because COVID has been also a time for creativity, of thinking what can be done, of internalizing what went wrong in the past and developing new things.
Thank you, sir. You had gone from one part or the other, and we, as you rightly said, we have abundance of festivals across Kerala. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that. And sir, moving on to the next question. Your service is rendered for setting up infrastructure as the mayor of Cochin Corporation and the collector of Ernakulam district, and you are the only person who has done the twin role. And what were the challenges, and how do you think the infrastructure of a place aids that context of event and tourism?
I think a lot of the work I did at that time was to label Kochi as a tourist destination. One of the first things I did was to brand Cochin and Ernakulam as the Queen of the Arabian Sea. That's a very romantic sounding sort of name, the Queen of the Arabian Sea. Unfortunately, it lasted for many years, and then it has slowly slipped out, but I think people are talking about it already. The Queen of the Arabian Sea, Kochi, the Queen of the Arabian Sea, it's something that, so nice, and once you hear it, people everywhere will have this curiosity to find out what it is. So that is something we should be looking at, to rebrand Cochin as the Queen of the Arabian Sea, or anything such names that can, that can get a global attention, like God's own country got global attention. Kochi, the Queen of the Arabian Sea, or Arabian Ocean, or whatever, can get a lot of brand attention abroad and in the country. Cochin can be also a lovely wedding destination. These are things I think, with my past knowledge of Cochin, I would suggest. It has all the requirements of wedding destination: beautiful backwaters, the Bolgati Island, the Wellington Island, the so many islands dotted around, the ancient town of Fort Cochin, which preserves its 17th, 18th, 19th atmosphere so much. Matanjeri close by, the Jew town, the Jew street, which is more famous than the rest, and some really nice rural scenes, some 30 to 40 minutes drive from Cochin, and got a nice beach in Cherai close by, and some in Fort Cochin. These are all necessary highlights for tourists, and but they certainly need the infrastructure to develop it further. What would be the infrastructure that I would suggest? I think we need better footpaths where people can walk without having to look down and trip over cavities, and so we need better footpaths, better what do you call them, sidewalks, or whatever you call them, broad ones where people, tourists are not always sitting in buses, they like to move around. So better footpaths is very important. Cycle tracks, many tourists these days prefer to cycle, so cycle tracks are very important. We don't have them in Cochin or many parts of Kerala. That's very important. A third suggestion I could make to you in terms of infrastructure would be the type of hop on, hop off bus service that apply in almost all European towns. The big bus company in London and in New York, they're hop-on hoppers. You buy a ticket for a day, you can hop on to any bus, and buses come in frequent intervals, 30 minutes or so. You hop on in one place and then get out in another before, say, Batanjeri, spend 2 hours there, catch the next bus that comes along without paying anything, get down in Fort Cochin. That's a hop-on. We don't have them here. I think it's very important to have them. Initially, they're going to run a loss because I don't think that culture is fought out and there are so many tourists here. But, if you give this on a long lease, 10-year, 15, 20-year lease to a company, they'll make losses maybe in the initial 3 or 4 years, and then they get the profits for their investment in infrastructure and in the buses. So we need to look at it in a long term. And also now a new bypass, I believe, is coming from Cochin, Kundanur to Angamali, which is about 35 kilometers or so. And it's going to pass through some of the most beautiful rural landscapes that Ernakulam district has to offer. What I would suggest is that when this is built as a 6 or 8 lane highway, I think we should seriously think of a cycling track all along these 35 kilometers. It's going to be a scenic cycling track. We should also think of, for example, having a nice walkways where you can walk along these 35 kilometers, not to 35, it is a more picturesque park, so that people can, to cycle, tourists and others will come down in droves to go through this. So this has to be planned in advance. It's happening now, and it's important to do this planning right away. That will be very important because it will be one of the most scenic cycle tracks, scenic roads, and one of the most scenic, footpaths, walkways in Cochin or in Kerala, in Ernakulam or in Kerala. Now, one more infrastructure development area I'll focus on are cable cars. Cochin is ideally suited for cable cars. There's so many islands around it. So we can have cable cars that connect Ernakulam with Bolgati, Ernakulam with Waipin, the other islands, Fort Cochin with Waipin. Of course, they got to be higher because the ships have to pass through, but they can be done. They can certainly be done. And I think cable cars will add to that infrastructure we are talking about to make Cochin and thereby also Kerala a much more tourist-friendly place.
Thank you, sir. You really forecasted the roadmap for the future. So my next question is, it is often said that the bureaucrats are the ones who run the country. You are one of the most lauded one. Do you feel they could be a little more in the limelight to give the public a sense of assurance and governance?
Thank you. Thank you for the compliment. Bureaucrats, civil servants are fortunately or unfortunately told during our training, at least in my days, not to be seen or heard, but we are seen or heard a lot, nevertheless. But that was perhaps a century ago. Indeed, it is, I would say that instead of putting the bureaucrat in the limelight, which is, of course, maybe necessary, what is important to do is to put the work of the bureaucrat in the limelight. What has happened, what has transpired. Not the person himself, but his work, what he has done, the result of his work. The results will give the public the sort of assurance and confidence in governance that you're talking about. And because the persons like us, we move on 3 years, 4 years in one place, and we move on. But the work needs to continue. And so the work needs to get the attention. And one of the reasons for, what happens with us transferable civil servants is also that I start a few projects in one place in Cochin, and a year later I get transferred, 2 years later, before the project is completed, or 3 years later I get transferred. And my successor has no interest in continuing with what I did. He wants to, chapa bhata, I have to put my brand there, I have to show my. So the next man comes along and starts doing his own thing, starting new projects, new things. And by the time he is transferred, the next man is not able to take up the work. Now, fortunately for me, one of the things I did when I took over, I didn't start anything very much new. I just completed the projects that my predecessor had begun. So I had a lot of finished products to show, and perhaps the reason why people still remember me, as you say, is because that I was able to finish a lot of it. So even though 50, 60, 70, 90% of the work, or maybe less or more, was done by my predecessor, all the credit, rightly or wrongly I must say, came to me. So that is very important, I think. I'm speaking from a point of view of somebody who did something. So it's very important for us bureaucrats also to remember that the work that's left undone by the predecessor should get the first priority. And when you get, I mean, when people start talking about you, what happened is I started a few projects, many of which I completed myself, for many of them. But I took short-term projects, 1 year, 1.5, 2 years, which could be completed within a short span of time, 6 months or so, 6 months to 1.5, 2 years, because one knows one gets transferred. Now, I also had the advantage that my successor did exactly what I did. He completed the projects I had left undone. Unfortunately for him, unfortunately for me, that credit all came to me. I don't think I deserve it. Thank you for the laudatory words. But it's a system, and it's a system that needs to be in the limelight. It's the results of the system that need to be in the limelight. Unfortunately, in India, we are personality driven. I think we should be systems driven. We should put in place systems. We are anti-systems as a culture. We can't now form a queue. You're standing in an airport in a long queue, and suddenly one guy comes and takes precedence and goes to the counter. And when people say, they call out to him and say, look, we are in the queue, he turns around, and then he's surprised. He has not seen the queue. Genuinely, he's not seen the queue. We are so, the systems don't come into our head, and he sees it and he's embarrassed because he couldn't even possibly think there would be a queue. He saw one man standing at the counter. He thought that was all, so he rushed in. So we need to build systems. I think bureaucrats and civil servants need to build systems, and that's very important. I think it's very important for us to understand that. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. We have to be system driven. Thank you. Thank
Exactly.
you for that.
Not personality driven. It's not that I did this. And it happens, when you build systems. I'm proud to say that some of the systems I developed, like things like putting up nameplates in all the streets in Cochin, the blue and white nameplate that you still see, was started by me when I was collector and mayor. It's still there after so many years. So once you have systems and people remember, you also get that, you also get the credit for it. But let's not be personality driven. Let's be systems driven. And that also applies to the tourism industry, which is largely systems driven, I must say.
Thank you, sir. So in 2002, you traveled to the Gulf in the midst of the Gulf War to return a refugee camp in the desert and bring back the Indians. Tell us in detail about that event in your life in terms of how it was planned and how it was executed.
Martin, part of the story is already told in Akshay Kumar's film Airlift. But the part of the story where I was involved and my team was involved was not told. He has only spoken about the story only speaks about the part where they left Kuwait. But they all came to a border no man's land between Jordan and Iraq. The refugees left Kuwait, entered Iraq, traveled across Iraq, came up to Jordan, and their plan is to go across into Jordan, go to Amman, which is about 40-50 kilometers away from the border, catch the Air India airlift to Mumbai. But what happened is that the Jordanian authorities blocked them entering Jordan because they didn't want 100,000 refugees there. So the initial 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 people who came thinking they could go into Jordan, be in Amman, stay in hotels, then go to the airport. Once the plane started flying, had stopped at the border, and it's a desert, very cold at nights, very hot in the daytime, absolutely nothing there. And that is when a government team, which I led, went there from India to provide succor to them. When we went there, we saw, that's the first time I saw people running after vans and water being thrown to them from these huge trailer trucks as though they were dogs, meat being thrown or food being thrown, and people fighting for a bottle of water, people fighting for a packet of food. It was terrible scene to see. There were 15, 20,000 people there already. So what we did, when I say we, our team, along with the government of Jordan, the Medicines Sans Frontiers, Red Crescent, Red Cross, everybody, we started to put up tents, arrange for food, get a system of registering, because the Jordanian authorities would only allow a plane load, let's say 250 people. If a plane was to land in the Amman airport, say by 10:30 this morning, they would allow 250 people in 5 or 6 buses to go into Jordan, travel directly to Amman airport without getting down anywhere, and board the flight and go away. They won't let anybody get down on the soil of Jordan. So these refugees got stuck there. What we did is put in place systems. We put tents up. We put medical facilities up. We about 110,000 or 120,000 people who fled from Kuwait, which is very well described in Akshay Kumar's Airlift. But this part is not mentioned at all. It is a very sad part. Families, children, old men, old women, pregnant women, sitting in the desert without a roof over their head, no food, no water, no medicines. But I'm glad to say that with all of us working together, within about 5 to 6 days, we started putting things in place. At the end of the day, within 45 days, we were able to transport all these people who left Kuwait and got stuck in that Amman, Jordan, Iraq border. We were able to send them very systematically to Amman airport when we got news, or when the Amman airport authorities or the Jordan government informed us that 5 flights were landing, 10,000 people, or 4 flights were landing, 800 people. We were able to arrange it very methodically on a first come, first served with priority purposes. The good part is there were no deaths, there were no casualties amongst these 120, 115,000 people. It is. I think it is a story that must be told. It has never been told before, but it must be a story that must be told. Airlift Part 2 or something. It is a tale that must be told, because you see, these were people who were leaving Kuwait. They are people extremely rich, living a very rich life there, and suddenly they had to throw off everything, carry just a suitcase and come, and then suddenly they thought they were going to Amman airport. Suddenly they are asked to get down in a desert. The bus goes back, and then there's nothing there. People begin to behave like, sadly, like animals. I don't blame them, because if I'm without food, I'll do the same. Without water, if my child is dying or is sick before me, I'll do the same. And I think that's a story that must be told. It's something that I can never forget. But the good thing is we were able to successfully, Government of India, Government of Kerala, everybody cooperating, and the Government of Jordan successfully completing this whole process without any untoward incidents.
So what a great story. And I wish and pray this untold story also will be filmized very soon. So moving on to the next question. In analog mode, tell us your experience as an administrator, what we must do to return to the old normal across education, work, trade, travel, tourism, events, and other aspects of life and economy. What should be our priorities?
Martin, I do not think we can ever return to the old normal. Life changes, life moves on. It will be a new normal. It will be a normal, but it will be a new normal. What has happened in 2020, it was cathartic in a way, and things are going to be cleansed and new. I'm not saying they're going to be bad or worse. I'm saying it's going to be cleansed and anew. It's going to be new. It's going to be different and better. It's not that it's different and bad. It's going to be different and better. Work will be different. We've already seen it. Work from home, which will become a new normal. For example, office spaces will reduce. The construction industry will change. There'll be no need for huge office spaces anymore. That will decline. Instead, homes will not only become homes but also offices. So there'll be better homes built. The type of you need better homes because it's both your office and your home. So homes will be redesigned. People will spend more money on spend more on better apartments, better homes. So since we began to work from home, there'll be also more to villages, because you don't need to commute every day to be near an office every day. So people will be to move to villages, to villas, to independent houses, where they get all the things to rural areas. And that is also a different type of construction industry coming up. You may have to go to an office. I'm not saying it will be completely missing. You may have meetings in the office once or twice a fortnight or 3 or 4 times a month. That would be necessary. There would be office spaces, but there would be shared office spaces. You spoke of education. Education will also begin to look different. I believe a lot of our education will move online. When Byju's came about 2-3 years ago, it was a fad. Some people took it. But today, online education, I think, is more or less accepted across the country, particularly in Kerala. So that will become a new norm. Not that I'm saying that school brick and mortar education will completely end. Like in the case of work from home, the children may be asked to come to the school, say 2 or 3 times in a fortnight, maybe a week, in a month. So school spaces will become shared. 5 schools will share one school building, one school playground, one school swimming pool, or whatever. So that is also going to happen in education. I don't think it's going to move completely back to the old way we learned. There will be schooling, there will be classroom education, but it will be balanced with online education. Trade, you spoke about it, that will also move online. Look at the huge huge jump in sales of Amazon, for example. So we will move away from brick and mortar, huge malls that are being built. that may see a change to online sort of sales that will increase. I'm not ruling out that it will completely go, but there will be a greater balance between brick and mortar shops and malls and to online trading. Transportation will change. You see the sort of Uberization of transport. Now, a car, when you have a driverless cars, why would you need a car in your garage? A car in your garage, 24 hours a day, it sits there, but it's used for 3 or 4 hours a day, if at all. During COVID times, we didn't use it at all. So are you going to spend many lakhs of rupees on a car, which we are going to use 2 or 3 hours a day and sitting idle the remaining 20 hours? That's bad economics. So if you have driverless cars, which will come and pick you up, take you to wherever you want to go, drop you back, or if you have Uberization where Ubers will come and pick you up, that will be the way transportation will change. Now, travel and tourism, I've already spoken about it. But let me also tell you one thing. I spoke about virtual education, online education, work from home, virtual work from home. There can be no virtual tourism. There can be no virtual travel. During these 8 or 9 months, I told you I traveled to about 80 countries. I watched a lot of BBC travel show. There's a Malayalam channel called Safari, which has this program called Sancharam, where he goes to many countries and he's a big traveler. I watch his programs. But the more I watch, the more I want to travel myself. Virtual travel will only whet your appetite for actual travel. So travel and tourism need not fear that virtual travel will take over. I don't think that's going to happen, not in the 40, 50 years to come. The more you see virtual travel, the more I see, for example, Rick Steen go to Mexico and taste tapas and the food there, the more I want to go there and taste it myself. It's not enough to just watch him taste on a TV. I want to see the crowds. I want to see the smell. I want to see the people. I want to see the buildings myself. So I think the travel and tourism industry is not going to go online. So that's the point I was trying to make, the contrast I was going to make. There'll be no satisfaction in virtual travel. Travel has to be real. It cannot be virtual. That's the biggest advantage of the travel and tourism industry. People want to travel, and the travel and tourism industry's role is to make it safe and secure and make a traveler like me feel confident that I can travel and nothing much will happen to me, only the usual risks associated with travel.
Thank you, sir. That was great insights. Sir, can you share a few words of encouragement to all the government servants across India who are tirelessly working to help the nation at this juncture?
Thank you, Martin. Yes, I would certainly do that. Long ago, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who was the first Congress Home Minister of Jawaharlal Nehru's cabinet, described civil service as India's steel frame. I don't know whether you must know about it. It was, and it still is, even today. It may have rusted quite a bit in a few places, but the civil service still holds the country. The officials hold the country together, the nation together in many ways. When there's a crisis like a flood or an earthquake or a drought, or like the pandemic that we saw, the COVID pandemic, that's when the government official comes on its own. He becomes an absolute professional, carrying out work, when there's a crisis. He performs at his best when there is a crisis, and they're doing so now. In times of pandemic, they're doing an extremely good job all across the country, from Kashmir to Kerala, from Gujarat to the Northeast. They're doing a great work. My compliments to them. My best wishes to them. Good luck to them in their work. Godspeed to them. We need you. The nation needs you to keep this country going. We need you, especially now that we are passing through a pandemic. So compliments on the extremely good work. The only thing I'll say is that post-pandemic also, please continue to work and perform professionally as you do during a crisis. Even when there's no crisis, we must, as a group of civil servants, we should perform and put our best step forward. All the best to every one of you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was great insight from you. And on the special day of you had enlightened all of us from the state of Kerala. What can we do all for the industry? So thank you so much, sir. And wishing again a very happy birthday to you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thanks for your wishes. Thanks a lot. And all the best to the travel and tourism industry. I'm sure you'll do well.